My boyfriend, Dominic, is a time traveler who holds the script, and I am the cannon fodder supporting female character. Dominic deceived me and took the spatial storage bracelet that has been passed down in my family from my hand, and then gave it to the popular campus belle, Violet, relying on my spatial storage bracelet. When the apocalypse came, Violet stockpiled food and supplies, managed to survive for 10 years, and finally welcomed the global spiritual energy recovery. The Earth has moved towards an alternative civilization. As for me, I was brutally hacked to death in the apocalypse. After I died, my flesh and blood were dismembered and eaten by those evil people who were driven crazy by hunger. Fortunately, I was reborn a week before the apocalypse arrived. 1. Looking at the bracelet on my wrist and the fair and tender face in the mirror, which has not been devastated by the harshness of the world yet, I'm still beautiful, I glanced at the time. There is still a week before the apocalypse. A week is still enough time. First of all, I have to beat Dominic to it and drip my blood on the bracelet to recognize it as the master. Well, people call this DNA authentication. Without the slightest hesitation, I took a knife, cut my finger, and dripped the blood on the bracelet. This bracelet was left to me by my grandmother, when my grandmother was on her deathbed. She once told me that this was a precious family heirloom from her mother's side, and she hoped that I would wear it well and that it could protect me from misfortune in the future. In my previous life, I didn't listen to my grandmother. When Dominic asked for the bracelet, I didn't think much and gave it to him directly. Sure enough, after my blood dripped into the bracelet, the space opened up. I saw a villa building and about 10 acres of fertile land. It's really great. There is a building to store supplies. As for the land, I can plant all kinds of crops, raise chickens, ducks and geese, and plant various vegetables. Who doesn't have a little bit of a vegetable planting complex? I also took stock of the money I had on me. When my mother left, she still left some money for me. Originally, while I was studying at university, I also found a part-time job and was an honest and decent person, but since I met Dominic, it seemed that I had been brainwashed. My mind became confused instantly. Although time was pressing, I couldn't be in a mess. I still wrote out various supply lists and then started buying all kinds of things: rice, flour, cooking oil, grain, salt, soy sauce, vinegar, all kinds of daily necessities, and so on. There were also all kinds of seeds and saplings. In an instant, 3 days passed. There were reports on the internet that a powerful typhoon was entering the area, accompanied by continuous heavy rain, and people were asked to be mentally prepared for flood prevention and disaster resistance. I knew that starting from this typhoon, the apocalypse was about to come, and the rules and order would gradually collapse. During these 3 days, Dominic ignored me for the first 2 days. I saw all kinds of things he posted in his moments to flatter Violet. He sent me a message yesterday, but I ignored it. Early this morning, he sent me a message again, and I still didn't pay attention to it. If it were before, when I saw him take the initiative to send me a message, I would have been happy for half a day and obediently followed his every word, wishing I had a dog tail to wag vigorously at him. I asked for leave from school and still needed to stockpile supplies today. The northeast rice I ordered from David had arrived, and I needed to pick it up today. My phone rang, and it was Dominic calling. I answered it. "What's the matter?" I asked directly. "Dominic, I'm very busy." "Clara, what are you busy with? Why didn't you reply to my message? I'm warning you. This time I'll forgive you for now. If there's a next time, we'll break up." I couldn't help laughing and directly said, "There's no need for a next time, we're breaking up right now." As I said that, I directly hung up the phone, too. After busy collecting that batch of northeast rice, some controlled items I had ordered through others also arrived, and I happily moved them all into the storage space. All kinds of seeds I bought online had also arrived. I plan to enter the storage space in the evening and start planting vegetables. Having a house and some fields is really great. Surviving through the apocalypse and waiting until the spiritual energy recovers, maybe I'll also have the opportunity to cultivate immortality. Just thinking about it makes me extremely excited. I bought a plate of egg fried rice from a small restaurant not far from the school gate and was happily going to go back and eat it. I kindly reminded the restaurant owner that the typhoon was coming, but when I returned to the small apartment I rented, I found that Dominic was waiting for me at my door. Come to think of it, there are only 3 days left until the apocalypse arrives, and he still hasn't gotten the storage bracelet in my hand. Even though he is a time traveler and holds the script, without getting the storage bracelet in my hand, he is nothing. "What's the matter?" I asked directly. Clara, come on. Stop being angry, you know I've been very busy recently. Dominic stood on the stairs and looked down at me in a condescending manner. He folded his arms across his chest and stood in a pose that he thought was very handsome. Oh, then you can be busy, I smiled and said. I'm also very busy recently and don't have time for a relationship. As I spoke, I took 2 quick steps and stood in a safe place. In my previous life, I was hacked to death. In this life, I have to be more careful. Although I know that Dominic doesn't dare to do anything before the apocalypse arrives, in fact, at the very beginning of the apocalypse, various major organizations really wanted to provide assistance and stabilize the order. They managed to maintain the order for the first 2 years, but later, all kinds of supplies couldn't keep up. There were floods accompanied by extreme heat, plague spread, and there was a shortage of medicine. More and more people died. The order gradually collapsed in the wasteland. While I was talking, I took out the key and opened the door. After entering, I was about to close the door directly. Clara, what do you mean? Dominic blocked the door with his hand. What do I mean? I asked back. You said you were busy, you wanted to break up, and you publicly announced in your moments that you were going to chase the campus belle. Violet, I agreed to it. You come here and ask me what I mean. I deliberately said it very loudly. Almost all the people living in this apartment building are college students. As is well known, the school usually arranges dormitories, so those who come out to rent houses are all for the sake of being in a relationship. In college relationships, breakups and reconciliations are the norm. But everyone has a craving for gossip. At this moment, the neighbors on both sides opened their doors and craned their necks, ready to get the latest gossip. Hearing what I said, Dominic's face looked a bit unpleasant, and he angrily rebuked me. Clara, what are you shouting about? I know you like me, playing hard to get. Do you think you can attract my attention with this method? Don't you think it's childish? After all, I had once fawned over him. It made this man's self-esteem so inflated that he became extremely arrogant. Whatever. As I said that, I was about to close the door. I was too lazy to pay attention to him. I still had to go to the space to plant vegetables. Oh, and the fruit trees I planted yesterday. I don't know if any of them have survived. Do I need to water them? Wait a minute. Stop making trouble. Dominic's face looked very unpleasant, and he said, I have something to talk to you about. What is it? I shrugged indifferently and asked, this. He pointed at the bracelet on my wrist and said, give this to me, and we'll continue our relationship. Otherwise, we'll break up. I was really amused. Does he have the time traveler's halo protecting him? It makes him so arrogant and conceited. Dominic, on the phone today, you said you wanted to break up, and I agreed. Now, you come to me asking for the bracelet that has been passed down in my family and even threaten me with a breakup. Who do you think you are? Is there a diamond in that place? My voice was very loud, and several of the onlookers in the corridor couldn't help chuckling. 3. Dominic's face looked very unpleasant, and he looked a bit ferocious. I smiled calmly and said seriously, Dominic, originally, I just thought you looked decent. Well, everyone is in a relationship in college. Without a boyfriend, I would feel embarrassed to go out and greet people. I was bored, so I fawned over you for fun. Now I have something to do, and I've found that you're just good looking on the outside, and I don't have the time to fawn over you anymore. To put it simply, I've dumped you. Do you understand? If you do, get lost quickly. I directly shouted the last sentence. Dominic probably didn't expect that I, who had always been obedient to him and seemed to be possessed, suddenly became tough. I directly threatened to dump him. Suddenly, his face turned red with anger, his lips trembled with rage. And he shouted, Clara, you wait for me. Next time, if you don't kneel on the ground and beg me, I will definitely not pay attention to you again. Get lost, I said. This time, Dominic didn't pester me and turned around and left. Opposite, someone was clapping softly. I couldn't help looking over and saw a tall and handsome man leaning against the door, clapping his hands and laughing. The moment I saw his appearance clearly, I was suddenly startled into a cold sweat. Christopher. A prominent figure in our school. In my previous life, I had no contact with him at all, but after I died, my soul remained and always followed Violet. If Violet is the popular female protagonist, then the person in front of me is the male protagonist. Dominic is like Violet's most loyal admirer. In the last 3 years of the apocalypse, the riots had reached a boiling point, and some people had mutated due to the plague. Despite everyone's persuasion, Violet's saintly heart flared up. And she insisted on researching the mutants. She exposed the location of the safe zone, resulting in the safe zone being attacked by villains, causing heavy casualties. Dominic took more than a dozen knife blows for Violet and was hacked to death. At this time, Christopher received the help message and rushed over with people. It's sad and ridiculous that Dominic thought of himself as affectionate and died blocking the knife for Violet with his body. Even though he was a time traveler and held the script, he was not the protagonist. After he died, Violet didn't even look at him. Instead, she used all her tricks to start seducing Christopher. At that time, Christopher already had a girlfriend. In order to be able to take the position openly, Violet used despicable means to betray Christopher's girlfriend, leading to her tragic death. After that, she started dating Christopher sweetly. For this reason, I don't have a good impression of Christopher either. I gave him a cold look and said, "What are you laughing at?" "Nothing." Christopher smiled with a bit of a rascal air and said, "The junior sister is quite good-looking, but her taste in choosing a boyfriend is really not good." "Is that so?" I retorted. "My taste in choosing a boyfriend may not be great, but senior, you should keep your eyes open and don't be deceived by some hypocritical and scheming girls." Christopher smiled and said, "Don't worry, I'm very good at recognizing such girls." I rolled my eyes and ignored him, preparing to close the door and enter the space to plant vegetables. The time is tight, and the task is heavy, but at this moment, Christopher walked up to me and said, "Junior sister, is that bracelet what your boyfriend wants?" He asked tentatively. "Is it an antique?" I nodded and said, "It's a family heirloom passed down from generation to generation." As I said that, I closed the door and ignored him. Unexpectedly, in the evening, someone banged on my door so hard that it seemed to shake the mountain. Moreover, it was accompanied by Dominic's voice. "Clara, open the door. I know you're in there. If you don't open the door, I'll kick it in." "What the hell?" I picked up a kitchen knife and opened the door. What do you want?" I said angrily. "Dominic, haven't I made it clear enough to you? I've dumped you. If you have any sense of shame, stop pestering me." As I spoke, my eyes fell on Violet. No wonder she is the popular campus belle. She has an oval face and a slender waist, looking like a seductive fairy. Dominic cursed. "Clara, are you out of your mind? You're acting like a shrew all day long. Can't you learn something good?" He was about to say something more, but Violet stopped him. "Clara, I need to talk to you about something." Violet smiled at me, pretending to be gentle and magnanimous. I just looked at her, on my guard. She deliberately smiled and said, "Aren't you going to invite me in for a seat?" "No, just say what you have to say here. You're not my friend," I said simply and directly. Next to us, when Dominic saw me contradict the goddess in his heart, he immediately got angry and said, "Clara, can't you speak nicely? Don't you understand the principle that guests should be treated well when they come to your door?" I didn't say anything and just gestured with the kitchen knife in my hand. "Anyway, when the apocalypse comes, I will need to use a knife to fight against others sooner or later. I might as well practice now." "What a shrew," Dominic cursed angrily. I looked ready to act wildly at any moment, which formed a sharp contrast with Violet's gentle and calm demeanor. Dominic's disgust for me was already obvious. "Dominic, talk to Clara nicely," Violet said, with a sense of superiority in her tone. Dominic glanced at me and then said, "Clara, Violet said that the bracelet on your hand is very similar to an old item that was lost in her family many years ago, so, please return it." After hearing this, I sneered and asked Violet, "Did you say that?" "Yes," Violet said directly. "Clara, I'm just trying to retrieve the old item that was lost in my family. I hope you can understand," I directly cursed. "Violet, can you have some decency? This bracelet was my grandmother's dowry. She wore it all her life and only put it on my wrist before she passed away." "What?" With just a few words, you dare to say it's an old item of your family? I even think you're like a dog that ran away from my family. Can you show your true form? Come back to me, and let me skin you and have a good meal of dog meat." Violet's face turned pale with anger, and she angrily said, "Clara, I'm being kind enough to negotiate with you." I didn't wait for her to finish and directly said, "Thank you so much, Clara, as long as you're willing to give me this bracelet." Violet said, "I promise that I can fulfill one of your wishes in the future." I was really holding back my anger. If it weren't for the fact that the apocalypse hadn't arrived yet, and it hadn't reached the point where the social order had completely collapsed, I would have been able to chop these two scoundrels to death with my knife. After hearing her words, I directly said, "My biggest wish now is for you two scoundrels to die quickly." 5. Violet angrily said, Clara, I'm being kind enough to negotiate with you. Do you know that my promise in the future can save your life at a critical moment? I sneered and said, who do you think you are? You don't even know what you are. Yet you come here empty-handed asking for someone else's family heirloom. And you say you can fulfill one of my wishes. I spit on that. Do you think you're the genie in the lamp? If you can really fulfill one of my wishes, then just go and die. Don't stay in this world and disgrace yourself. I don't even know how your mother gave birth to someone like you. You have such a unique appearance and the courage to live like this. For Violet, her beauty is her greatest pride. Now, I actually despised her with the beauty she was so proud of. It was as if I had poked her in the lung, and she was so angry that she was about to explode. Clara, how dare you insult me? She pointed at me and said, do you know that I am the master of this world? When she said this, she even puffed out her proud chest. Bees also think they are the masters of the world. After all, there are a group of drones around them. I sneered, Violet, take your admirer and get lost quickly. Don't get in my way. Violet was very angry, however, she couldn't leave. There were only a few days left until the apocalypse. According to Dominic's script, she should get the bracelet passed down in my family today, open the personal space, and start her journey as the female protagonist. I used to fawn over Dominic. For them, I was no challenge at all. In Dominic's own words, I was a brainless fool, and a few sweet words would be enough tone. Even though I had scolded her like this, Violet still didn't leave. Instead, she put on an act and said, Clara, this bracelet is really important to me. You can't delay important matters because of petty love. I'm telling you, there's really nothing between me and Dominic. Don't misunderstand. As long as you're willing to give me the bracelet, I'll give him back to you. I laughed so hard that I almost fell over, as if I had heard an extremely funny joke. I pointed at Dominic and said, Dominic, did you hear that? The goddess in your heart just treats you as an object. When she's happy, she plays with you. When she's not, she can kick you away at any time. Unfortunately, I was just having fun with you because you were amusing. After all, for someone like you, since your goddess doesn't like you, of course I don't like you either. Dominic had always been flattered and fawned over by me. When he heard me say this, he immediately angrily rebuked, Clara, who do you think you are? You're just an extra. I'm giving you a chance to grovel at my feet. Hand over the bracelet quickly, or you won't even know how you'll die. I was about to retort. From the opposite side, there came an unruly laugh. Then, Christopher walked over with an unsteady gait. When I saw Christopher, I deliberately paid attention to Violet and Dominic. Sure enough, Violet obviously had a look of admiration in her eyes. As for Dominic, he was very wary of Christopher. Even more, he showed an inexplicable hostility. Who are you? Dominic was the first to attack. Christopher sneered and said, Dominic, don't you know who I am? I don't know how Clara will die. But don't you know how you'll die? Hee. It's not a pleasant experience to be stabbed more than a dozen times and be dismembered while still alive, is it? I'm telling you very seriously that after you die, your body will be eaten. There's no way around it. Without food, the fresh and healthy bodies of living people are valuable. In an instant, Dominic's face turned extremely pale. Even more, he couldn't help covering his chest and gasping for breath. I also took a big step back in a bit of a panic. Why was this happening? I knew that Dominic was a time traveler with a script, and he had a certain chance of becoming the protagonist. In my previous life, he almost succeeded, but after all, he overestimated the brilliance of being a time traveler. He took a knife for Violet and died a miserable death. Why could Christopher predict the future? Violet rushed in front of Christopher and smiled brightly. Even more, she adjusted her clothes and flicked her hair. She tried her best to make herself look more charming. Christopher, I didn't expect to see you here. Did you receive the letter I wrote to you last time? Oh, did you eat the breakfast I sent you? I made it all by myself. I was shocked. Theoretically, at this time, Violet and Christopher didn't know each other, right? 6. Christopher took a small step back, creating some distance between him and Violet. Then he said coldly, Violet, I've rejected you many times. Please respect yourself. But Violet seemed not to understand his words and leaned towards him. Christopher, I just like you, don't always reject me. I coughed softly to interrupt her performance and said, Violet, if you want to pursue Christopher, please make an appointment at another time. Don't act coquettish at my door. Violet gave me a fierce look and angrily said, Clara, what do you mean? I'm telling you, Christopher is not someone you can covet. Before I could speak, suddenly, Christopher reached out and put his arm around my waist, and then he cursed at Violet. Miss Violet, can you be a bit more decent? Who I like has nothing to do with you. Anyway, you'll never be able to reach my level in your life. The situation was a bit chaotic, and I was also a bit flustered. Finally, Christopher forcefully drove Dominic and Violet away. After they left, I came back to my senses. Miss Clara, do you want to cooperate? Christopher suddenly said. Cooperate? I frowned and asked. Christopher, what do you mean? He asked me why I suddenly stopped loving Dominic when I used to love him. I smiled and said calmly, love is something that comes and goes without a trace, just like that. I'm afraid it's not that simple, right? Christopher smiled. Clara, we are both people with great opportunities. You have a precious spatial treasure left by ancient cultivators, which has attracted the coveting of time travelers and the system. When I heard Christopher say this, I was stunned. Originally, I thought that as a reborn person with a bracelet space, I would definitely be able to survive the apocalypse and welcome the recovery of spiritual energy on Earth. I didn't expect that others also had great opportunities. She actually has a powerful weapon like the system. I stammered. Yeah, the system gave her the charm skill. Ordinary people will involuntarily follow her and submit to her. Christopher said, did you activate the bracelet? Christopher pointed at the bracelet on my wrist and said, I couldn't help covering the bracelet on my wrist. Clara, let's cooperate. Christopher sighed. When the apocalypse comes, do you think you can just stockpile some things and survive? Aren't you afraid that Violet will try to take it by force? I frowned slightly and said, although a great disaster is about to come, but, the social order hasn't completely collapsed yet. How could it come to the point of robbing? But Christopher said, Clara, what you saw before was just a preview. That is to say, it was a reflection of the future in reality. This time, everything is real. We don't have a chance to restart. I leaned against the door and looked at Christopher, feeling dizzy and thinking about his words. I am a reborn person. I know that Dominic is a time traveler with a script, so he decisively chose the female protagonist, the charming Violet. Violet is blessed with a powerful weapon like the system. I am a reborn person with a spatial bracelet. What about Christopher? What does he represent? Originally, I thought that Christopher represented the power of the human world. After all, he came from a wealthy and powerful family. 7. But now I find that he is far more complicated than that. Mr. Christopher, of course I understand about cooperation, I said. I saw fragments of time and space. Since I was a child, I have had some special abilities. Christopher said directly, a person who can see the future, a prophet. In the game of werewolf killing, prophets are usually short-lived gods. Clara, what was that saying? The social order collapses, Christopher suddenly said. Since we were being honest with each other, I didn't hide anything and directly said, there are still 2 days until the typhoon comes, and the great disaster is about to begin. But even when the great disaster comes, at the beginning, the social order won't collapse immediately, and the evildoers are still afraid of the law. Until later, the public trust became worse and worse. There wasn't enough food, the plague spread, and more people died, due to the plague and some other factors. Some people began to mutate. Once people have power beyond that of ordinary humans, they will start to do whatever they want. My voice gradually became lower. In my previous life, I was dismembered and eaten by evildoers. I died a very miserable death. After being reborn, I was filled with hatred, but there wasn't much I could do. The only thing I could do was to protect the storage space, stockpile food, and survive these 10 years. But when I thought about it carefully, it would be extremely difficult for me to survive these 10 years alone without the help of external forces. I asked Christopher, what are you going to do? Before the apocalypse comes, she must get the storage bracelet. So, he didn't finish the rest of the sentence, but I understood, using me as bait to make Violet and Dominic not hesitate to rob by force. In this way, we could send them to prison. Clara, this is a risky move. If it goes wrong, it will hurt you, Christopher said. It's okay. In a critical moment, I can hide in my personal space to take refuge for a while, I said. Christopher and I also finalized several details. The next day, when I went out to buy supplies, I was dragged into a van by 5 or 6 delinquent teenagers. We left the city and headed straight for the unfinished building in the north of the city. I was tied to a chair, and Violet, along with Dominic and several other people, came in. Clara, where's the bracelet? She asked me directly. I smiled brightly. Since I was in their hands, they had naturally searched me, but they didn't find the storage bracelet. Violet's face looked very unpleasant. We could even say that she was a bit flustered now. When I activated the storage bracelet, I could hide it, so I thought there was no risk in Christopher's plan, and I felt confident. Violet searched me up and down again, of course finding nothing. She raised her hand and slapped me in the face. She asked me angrily, "Clara, did you give the bracelet to Christopher, you slutty woman? Do you think Christopher will like you just because of a storage bracelet? I'm telling you, an ant is just an ant. You'll never have a chance to rise up." I still smiled and didn't even bother to say a word. After all, if it was just a simple kidnapping, maybe Violet could use her charm ability to cry fake tears and say that she was just jealous of me and did it on a whim, not really wanting to hurt me. But if I had serious injuries on my body, it would be a different matter. I even discussed the script with Christopher. If I wasn't injured badly enough at that time, I would ask him to help me. Anyway, we had to send Violet to prison for sure. Sure enough, Violet seemed to be irritated by me. She picked up an iron rod from the side and was about to hit me. Wait a minute. Just then, I suddenly heard a voice. Then, a black panel appeared in the air. Immediately, the panel transformed into the appearance of a teenager, wearing wide sleeves and a long robe, with a face as beautiful as jade. The system, I was slightly surprised. Sure enough, the teenager walked slowly in front of me and said, "Host, she has already merged with the bracelet. Now, either she hands it over herself, or we need to use other methods to strip it from her." I squinted my eyes and smiled, saying, "The system, you actually showed up in front of people." The system smiled calmly and gracefully, but I felt a chill. I really didn't expect that the system on Violet could actually appear. What should we do? At this moment, I suddenly felt a bit panicked. The system looked at Violet, then at me, and then said, with the ability of ordinary people, "It's impossible to strip the bracelet from her, host. You've missed the opportunity. I reminded you a long time ago to take action as soon as possible, but you just disdained it and believed the nonsense of that time traveler." As he spoke, his eyes flashed slightly and landed on Dominic. I found that Dominic seemed a bit afraid of him and even involuntarily took a step back. "What should we do now?" Violet asked me. As she spoke, she actually put her arm around the system's arm and shook it. Speaking in a coquettish tone, "I don't care, I'm your host, baby." Ugh, I almost couldn't hold back my vomit. It was really disgusting. "I'll help you strip the bracelet from her." The system looked at me and walked directly towards me. I knew it was bad. I stopped for a moment and was about to hide in my personal space. However, I couldn't move at all. There was a beam of light from the system that enveloped me. Then, he reached out and stabbed towards my forehead. 8. I thought I was definitely going to die this time. Damn Christopher, this is a really bad idea. In the future, if I have a future, I will never put myself in any dangerous situation again. But just then, a sword light fell from the sky and slashed fiercely at the system. "Old bastard system, take this sword." A young man in black, with a fierce expression on his face, held a rusty bronze sword and stabbed fiercely at the system's chest. The sword looked ordinary, but the system was very afraid and quickly retreated. The young man roared and swung the sword at me. Immediately, the iron chains that bound me broke into pieces. "Run quickly, you idiot," the young man angrily rebuked me. As he spoke, he swung the sword at the system again and shouted, "Damn it, it's really not easy for me to track you down and force you to show up. Come on, have the guts to fight one-on-one." In an instant, the system was forced into a state of confusion by him. I had already started running. After all, this wasn't the script that Christopher and I had arranged in advance. Things were developing in an uncontrollable direction. Damn it, why did the system show up in front of people, and why did it try to strip the personal space from me? Just then, I clearly felt the threat of death, even if it was just for a moment. Who was this young man? Someone from Christopher? No. I suddenly had a flash of inspiration and even shivered. It's not certain whether Violet is the female protagonist or whether Christopher is the male protagonist, but the ultimate villain was determined from the start. Charles, the ultimate villain, and the system were locked in a fierce battle. Christopher finally arrived late. Violet and Dominic were caught. The system disappeared without a trace. Charles just rolled his eyes at Christopher, took the rusty bronze sword, and turned around and left. There were so many people present, yet not a single one dared to stop him. After Charles left, I came out from my hiding place and frowned, saying, "Christopher, Why didn't you keep Charles here? You should know that leaving him alive is a great disaster. I clearly remembered that in the 9th year of the apocalypse, under the dual attacks of the plague and mutations, the order of humanity completely collapsed. Many people longed to mutate during the plague and become powerful immortal cultivators who could fly and travel through the earth, but the probability of this was really too small. Instead, there was more killing, looting, and death. Charles, with just one sword in hand, massacred an entire city of people. He led a group of villains to attack the safe strongholds more than once or twice. Christopher reached out to hold my hand, but I shook it off. Cooperation is one thing, but other matters are something else entirely. Clara, do you have more of the female protagonist's kind-heartedness than Violet? Christopher smiled sarcastically and said, even if the apocalypse comes and the social order collapses, so what? Even if the order is reshuffled, we still can't do anything to him. I followed Christopher, taking uneven steps. Outside, the wind was blowing and it was raining, crackling, through the rain curtain. I looked at the pedestrians hurrying in the dusk and the lights in thousands of households on the tall buildings. Soon, this world would sink, and I was powerless to stop it. 9. Violet and Dominic were imprisoned because of the kidnapping case. When the disaster came, I also changed my opinion of Christopher to some extent. He led people to build safe strongholds and rescue people everywhere. He also kept his promise and protected me very well, sometimes. I also used the storage space to give him a hand. Time passed quickly, and I often heard news about Violet and Dominic, or perhaps Christopher deliberately told me. After all, in my previous life, we were always entangled, even though Christopher said that it was just a reflection of the future in the current world's preview and not real. But in my memory, those things were all very real. Just half a year after Violet was imprisoned, in the floods and heavy rains, she led a group of extremely vicious people in the prison to escape, relying on the system and Dominic, the time traveler with the script in hand. She used her charm skill to make countless villains submit at her feet and started her path of turning evil. Or perhaps, that wasn't turning evil. She was originally bad. It's just that now she has become unscrupulous. In the 7th year of the apocalypse, the world's population decreased by 1/3, under the influence of the plague. Zombies appeared. At the same time, mutants also emerged. Violet became a mutant, with wings on her back and immense strength. Once, she tore apart a fighter jet with her bare hands. In the interweaving of lightning and thunder, she hovered in midair. With her extremely beautiful face and strange wings, she was like a celestial being descending to the mortal world. Countless people knelt at her feet. At this moment, she really seemed like the protagonist. However, that night, she led Dominic and attacked our safe stronghold. In 7 years, I also mutated, by understanding the chi of heaven and earth and experiencing the might of the laws of the universe. I became an immortal cultivator. I led people to rise up and resist, but in the end, the safe stronghold was breached, and countless ordinary people fell one after another. Violet rushed towards me, her hands turning into sharp claws as she grabbed at me. Clara, you bitch. Do you really think Christopher can protect you for a lifetime? I won't be able to relieve the hatred in my heart until I tear you apart alive. As she spoke, she launched a fierce attack on me. Countless villains broke into the stronghold, burning, killing, and looting. I watched as fires blazed all around, and the sounds of gunfire and explosions continued without end. Blood stained my ankles. I had never hated Violet as much as I did at that moment. I shouldn't have listened to Christopher. 7 years ago, when we caught Violet, we should have found an opportunity to kill her. I picked up a rocket launcher from the side and rushed towards her, but just then, a black shadow, like a missile, fell from the sky. The bronze sword tore through the sky, flying straight towards Violet like a shooting star. Charles, you're a madman. Violet was furious. The two of them fought fiercely in midair, darkening the sky, and Christopher always arrived late. When his fighter jet arrived, Violet was struck by Charles with a sword. With the help of the system and Dominic's cohesion, she fled in a sorry state with a group of villains. To my surprise, Christopher actually concentrated all the firepower and opened fire on Charles. The bronze sword sliced through the sky, and Charles disappeared into the void. Christopher, are you crazy? I once again had a disagreement with Christopher. Why on earth did you try to assassinate Charles? I frowned and asked. Although Charles was also a villain, after the apocalypse began, I learned that the power of Charles's family was huge. Like Christopher's family, they both came from powerful and wealthy families. In the early years, Christopher didn't dare to challenge the power of Charles's family. Many years later, in order to compete for their respective interests, Christopher took advantage of Charles's difficult situation. Christopher told me that Charles was a villain and a madman. He also asked me, "Have you forgotten how he massacred the city?" I was silent in response. 10. In the ninth year of the apocalypse, the floods in some areas had receded, and it was no longer extremely hot. The exposed ground had fertile soil and a suitable climate. The Astronomical and Meteorological Bureau predicted that the floods had begun to recede, and the high temperature would no longer persist. They called on the masses to leave the safe strongholds and rebuild their homes. However, zombies and mutants were running amok in this world. Some mutants were in power. The common people could never return to the time before the Great Disaster. The United Nations designated this day as the first year of the apocalypse. A new era began. On July 12th of the first year of the apocalypse, Christopher sent me a video. Dominic launched a surprise attack on Violet, killed her, and ate her flesh raw. After that, he led the villains under Violet and started to capture cities and seize territories, occupying favorable terrain. I stared at the video for a long time. "What's wrong?" Christopher asked me. "Violet is dead. Aren't you happy?" He loved Violet so much, I stammered. Dominic was purely calculating with a prepared mind against an unprepared one, taking advantage of Violet being injured in a fight with other mutants. He launched a surprise attack. Christopher looked at me for a long time before saying, "In the former peaceful and prosperous era, men and women would talk about love when they were bored." I fell silent. In the winter of the first year of the apocalypse, the Kunlun ruins that I had been looking forward to for a long time opened. I went to the Kunlun ruins together with Christopher, but at the entrance, Dominic blocked our way. "Clara, I killed her." Dominic exuded an unmaskable stench all over his body. His eyes were red, and barbs grew on his spine, sticking out. He was dressed in rags and looked almost crazy. I couldn't help taking a step back. "Clara, I killed her. Aren't you happy?" "What are you looking for in the Kunlun ruins? I can help you." He tried his best to smile, but when he opened his mouth, there were only fangs. "Clara, I killed Violet. Can you let me eat you? I really long for your flesh and blood," it said. "If I eat you, I can recover." He was already turning into a zombie. As he spoke, he pounced towards me. Charles descended from the sky, with a flash of the bronze sword's light. He beheaded Dominic, perhaps due to the mutation. Perhaps because he had already turned into a zombie. Even after being beheaded, he still didn't die. He kept shouting that he wanted to eat me. He kept saying that if he ate me, he would be the protagonist of this world, who doesn't have a little bit of a vegetable planting complex. So, after entering the Kunlun ruins, Christopher's family and Charles's family started to cooperate. In the 10 years of the apocalypse, these two families fought each other to the death, and millions, tens of millions, and even more people among the remaining common people died because of it. The city was filled with corpses, and the blood flowed like a river, and now, the two of them were acting as if nothing had happened and started to enter the Kunlun ruins hand in hand. They were exploring the so-called returning ruins world and the civilization of cultivating immortals. Charles secretly reminded me that the words Dominic said before his death were not aimless, and he told me to be careful. So, only by eating me can one become the protagonist of this world. I am who I am the protagonist of my own life. 11. The three of us each had our own opportunities in the Kunlun ruins. After I entered the Kunlun ruins, I used my personal space to shake off Christopher and Charles. I fled deep into the Kunlun ruins to cultivate. I hid there for 3 years. 3 years later, I was ready to leave the Kunlun ruins. Suddenly, a pitch-black panel appeared in front of me. "Hello, my master." The system imitated the cute voice of a human. "Little master, do you want to become the master of this world? Bind with me, and you'll be the master of the world." It was very similar to some of the fraud remarks before the first year of the apocalypse. Me, a scammer, send money. So, I gripped the long sword in my hand and sternly shouted, "Scram."